Walking without skin. Managing adversity with vulnerability.
Pain is wrong, every inch of my heart like an open wound. I can't go on, I'll drown if I don't stop the bleeding soon.
People don't realize what they can do if they really put their mind to it. Don't be afraid to get input from other people. Don't let other people tell you what you can't do, but don't be afraid to get input from people that are trying to help.
Where can I find some protection to prevent this ongoing infection? I'm walking without skin. Without skin.
You are listening to Walking Without Skin, the show where we encourage our guests to be vulnerable, to share their voices with authenticity, to tell their stories from the heart. We will talk about hope and recovery, about overcoming loss, changes, challenges, and adversities. We will walk without skin.
How will I know when it's safer? When every step feels like sandpaper, I'm walking without skin. I'm walking without skin.
And here is your host, Lois Wagner.
Hi, I am Lois, your friend for forgiveness and the creator of Walking Without Skin. I have a book with the same title, Walking Without Skin. And I'm really excited to speak to our guest today, Dan Henk from New York City. Hi, Dan.
Hey, what's up?
Good, it's great. I'm so excited to have you here. I've looked at some of your work and I must say it's impressive. Dan,
thank you.
Dan owns a tattoo shop in New York City, and he is a published author and has done artwork for books, magazines, apparel, and for bands. So he's really done some amazing work, and I advise you all to go and check out his website. His designs can be a bit disturbing, a little bit horror genre, but really incredible work. But before we start talking about you and your work, please can you tell me what you understand by the term walking without skin?
I did a little bit of research, and it seems like people that have gone through a lot and they push forward and they manage to make something out of themselves despite all the adversity.
And
that's what little I got out of it.
And I'm sure you've been walking without skin most of your life.
Well, my parents are deeply religious and military, and they lived in the deep South. I'm not religious. I'm not military, and I was a teenage punk rocker, so it did not go well.
A punk rocker. Well, it certainly shows in your work.
Thank you.
So, Dan, tell us a little bit about the work that you do and the art and what took you to that kind of genre of work.
Well, initially, I wanted to be a comic artist, and there were a bunch of people, especially a bunch of talent coming over from the UK, like Alan Moore, that really inspired me. And I was like, oh, this is what I got to do, because I love writing and I love drawing, and this was a perfect combination, I thought, of the two. And so I really wanted to do that. We lived all over because my parents are military. So we lived at one point, we lived in Florida, in like northern kind of white trash, economically deprived Florida. But there were a lot of independent comic artists there, and they worked at like bookstores and stuff like that. But I'd bring my stuff to them, and I'd be like, a little spunky kid with like drawings that I'm sure horrible if you look at them now. But they give me advice, and they were very nice. And I was like, this is what I got to do. So I'd sit every morning and I'd spend hours just drawing and bringing it to show to people that I really looked up to. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. And then my family moved, like every 3 years we moved because they're military. So we moved to Virginia from Florida, and they were actually a lot more restrictive in Virginia. Like they looked down on all that stuff. And I mean, it didn't help that I had like blue hair and a mohawk and, spiky leather jacket that I painted all up and stuff. I had a pretty hard time. And I ended up homeless. And I was trying to go to art school, and my dad wouldn't co-sign a loan. I couldn't get a loan by myself. I had no credit. I was a kid. I remember I went to my guidance counselor, and she said, "Get ready for a cure pumping gas, because that's all you're ever going to do."
How come you ended up homeless?
Well, like I said, my dad's real conservative. He's real religious. He's military. I was a punk rocker. My ears are pierced. I had a blue mohawk. We did not get along at all. And he said maybe he would co-sign a loan if I picked a real career and went to school for something technology related, because I actually did really well in math and science in school. I was like, but that's not what I want to do for a living. So it was like my way or the highway. He kicked me out, and then he moved. So I was homeless, like living in the woods, like taking showers at McDonald's restrooms, dumpster diving. I remember one night it was so cold, I just walked around town all night so I didn't freeze to death.
So how did you get off the streets? What happened?
Well, I had friends that would occasionally let me crash on the couch. The problem is, once their parents would find out I was homeless, they're like, no, he can't stay here. But I managed to borrow some clothes. I went in for an interview. I got an interview with Chuck E. Cheese, which is a horrible place. I do not recommend working there. But I got a job with Chuck E. Cheese. It lasted about 2 weeks. I got a better job. And I slowly scaled up from there, and then saved up my money, went to community college for art. And my art teacher, that's another story. He was really, really nice guy. He's a controversial artist in D.C. He's like, if you want an art career, you got to move to New York City. So that's what I did.
And then how did your art career take off?
Well, I thought, I was like, oh, I went to art school. I've been practicing all this time. I have all these drawings. I had a very slick, professional looking portfolio that at the time cost me a lot of money. And I thought it would be super easy. I get a job right away. And it's not super easy. I interviewed with DC Comics. I interviewed with Penguin Books. I interviewed with Marvel Comics. I interviewed with Image Comics. They all have different things going on. Like the guy I interviewed with the DC Comics was about to get fired, so he was really negative. I interviewed with Penguin Books, and they pay a lot of money, but they only give you a job like every year and a half. Nothing seemed to be working out. I ended up working at a restaurant. I was like, I'm like in my middle 20s, and you get really afraid. You're like, I'm in my middle 20s and I'm not doing the career I want to do. And so I was getting stressed out. I was like, I've got to do something. And I had a friend of my brother's who's a tattoo artist, and he taught me how to tattoo. And I was thinking, I'll tattoo until I get a real job doing artwork and, writing stories. And I just loved it so much. I fell into it. And actually now I've done comic books, and I've published books and so on, but I love tattooing.
And tell me about your favorite genre of art and tattoos and writing.
They kind of all go together. They're all dark themed, but they're not straight up horror. Like I'm really not into the whole like slasher, like just crazy person with lots of blood and guts. I really like a good story. Like I love like the Edgar Allan Poe sort of, like there's kind of a darkness, impending doom, but it's literate. It goes through a whole process, and it kind of explains, like it stretches itself out like a mental breakdown, a story, something going on. That's what I really appreciate. So actually I try and do that in everything, from my writing to even when I do like a painting or an illustration. I'm thinking about what story does this tell, not just, oh, this color looks.
Achieved it. It really is brilliant work. So you've had a lot of challenges in your life. Would you like to share some
One or
of
two. Well, in DC, right before I moved, it was, I would say right before I moved here, though, I got stabbed by a crackhead. And I was like, I don't know. Nothing that happens, I try to let hinder me from my ultimate goal. Because, if you fail in life, nobody really cares. I mean, if you care, but nobody really cares. You're like, who's this guy? I don't know him. So I was like, you've got to make it. So you're kind of striving for yourself. So if you have the ambition, which I did, I was like, you got to keep trying and trying and trying until something works. And so then when I moved to New York City, everything was going fine. And I started tattooing, and then I came down with brain cancer. And so I was in the hospital. It was a huge surprise to everyone because I'm pretty healthy. And they're like, you're the healthiest guy we know, and you have brain cancer? And I remember I was in the hospital in ICU recovering from surgery, and the Twin Towers went down, like 9/11. And I got out of the hospital. My girlfriend that I was going out with, she was really good. She visited me every day at the hospital. She always looked really concerned. And we hadn't been going out that long, but I was like, this is a really good person. So then we got married. We were married for about 6 years, and then she died in a hit and run. I don't want to tell you a tale of sorrow, but there's a lot of stuff that went on. Eventually, I moved to Austin, Texas, because I was like, I'm tired in New York. I had brain cancer there. My wife died there. And then when I was in Austin, Texas, I bicycle everywhere, and I was bicycling home from work, and some girl was texting while she was driving, and she just plowed into me. And I went backwards through the windshield of her car, and I woke up in the hospital like 4 hours later. And I remember there was a police officer standing over me, and he just looked shocked. Like I came to, and I was like, and he just looked shocked. And I was like, what's going on? What's going on? And all he could say is like, did you see your bike? I was like, what? It's like, did you see? Apparently, because I had a carbon fiber bike, it was shattered. It was all in pieces. It was completely destroyed. And then, the girl, she didn't really have any excuse, but she said, well, he didn't have bike lights on. And then in the hospital, the police officer says, oh, we saved your bike lights. Here you go. So he handed me the bike lights.
Well, if that isn't enough. So I want to know how you overcame all of those. What was in your mind, your attitude that managed you to keep going through all of that?
Like I said, nobody cares if you don't make it. And I was like, I'm going to make it. So I remember when I had brain cancer, I started doing a lot of artwork for bands, and I was painting an album cover for the band Shy Elude. And I was about 35 hours into a 40-hour painting when it came down with brain cancer. So I called Matt Fox, one of the big movers and shakers behind the band, and I said, hey, I'm almost done with your painting. I have like 5 hours left, but I have brain cancer. And he's like, holy shit, you have brain cancer. Oh my God, you just get better. Don't worry about it. I was like, no, I'm going to finish your painting. So I got out of the hospital, and I probably took a couple of days, but I went right back into it because I was like, if I die tomorrow, at least I finished this painting. So I finished the painting, and that's kind of, whenever anything happens, I always think, how am I going to get through this? What am I going to do? There's not a single point where I go, all right, I'm sunk. I always figure, maybe it's not too much of an optimist look, but I always go, there's got to be some way to get out of this, or to make this better, to make this work.
So after your wife died, how did you manage to cope with that loss?
I moved. It wasn't like it just brushed over me and it was nothing. I don't know. It seems like to me it affects me more when something happens to other people, like they're close to me, than when it happens to me. Because when it happens to me, if anything, I just go, oh, this is my fault. I got to get through it. Or this is my problem. I got to get through. So this is on me. But when it happens to someone else, I feel like the universe is out of my control, which, the universe is out of all of our control. But I really feel like everything's out of my control. And I'm like, what is going on? This is fucking horrible. That's what happened with my wife. She got hit. We went to the hospital. It's a very bad hospital. It's in, if you're not familiar with New York, it's in the Marcy Projects, which is where Jay-Z's from. It's a very bad area. And apparently she got hit by a car and hit her so hard that it destroyed the front bumper, destroyed the front headlight. threw her off her, she was a motorcycle, threw her off her motorcycle, and she flipped over and snapped her neck when she landed. But the EMS didn't tell the hospital, so the hospital revived her on machines. And nobody knew except for the EMS that she snapped her neck. And the thing is, if you spend that long with a snapped neck, you're never going to recover. But nobody knew that at the hospital. So for 2 days, we're like watching the monitors, like maybe they go up a little bit. We're like, oh, there's hope. There's hope. There was no hope. And I don't know. I've rarely in my life cried. And that was one of the 2 times I've cried in my life. When I realized there was no hope, and it was just, that was the end. And this is what I usually do is I usually try and like find something to do. So it's like, we have to find who did this. So we made flyers, we put flyers, we stapled them everywhere. I had friends stapling them everywhere. I was on the local news. My brother-in-law, like her brother, was on the local news. She's Spanish, so it was, he was on Telemundo and Univision. I was on New York 1 and New York 5. And I remember she was a tattoo artist, but she did a little bit of like alternative modeling. And we hired an attorney, and he said, pitch her as a model. The minute she was pitched as a model, all of a sudden it was all in the papers. Like before, it's just like, girl, tattoo artist, nobody cares. But the minute that she was a model, it was like, oh, well, look at this poor girl. Not that it really matters, except for it matters when people are paying attention. And people are, I don't know, people have a funny perception of reality sometimes. But yeah, so it took 5 days for people to take it seriously. And then when they took it seriously, I was getting calls all the time because I was a tattoo artist. So it was all in the tattoo community. It was in all the magazines and all the websites and everything. I was getting a lot of support. People were calling me from across the country. And we knew it was a dark sedan. And they're like, oh, yeah, I just saw a dark sedan with body damage. Or, oh, yeah, this just rolled into my shop. None of those leads led anywhere, but everybody was trying. And then she was on a motorcycle. So the motorcycle community jumped in. I don't even know the motorcycle community that well, but it was in all the magazines and everything. And they were trying to help as well. But 5 days later, you're not going to find a hit and run driver. Unless there's somebody famous. I remember somebody hit the New York City governor's limo and it went off a bridge. They didn't even know the color of the car. They found that guy within 1 day.
So, Dan, you said the universe is out of our control, but our emotions are within our control. So how did you manage your emotions?
I always try. I shouldn't say always, but I always try to have the attitude of I'm going to look for some way to make this work. I think part of that is being like that rebellious punk rocker in the South when I was a kid, because everybody's against you. So you're like, either I'm going to be myself and do my thing, or, I'm just going to fade away into obscurity. So you just try and always find some way to get, through everything.
Well, you certainly seem to have got through it very well. So well done on that. So just back to your tattoo. Can you share the weirdest tattoo that you've ever had to do?
Well, most of what I do now is I do like full sleeves and full back pieces and like really big elaborate stuff. And I kind of had my 15 minutes of fame where I was in all the magazines. So I had people that traveled to me from Europe and everything. And that's what they tend to get. I mean, if you travel from Europe, you're not going to travel from Europe to get a tiny little tattoo. So most of my best stories are when I first started out and I was working at, they're called flash shops in New York City, which is like walk-in shops. And I don't know. I have so many good stories. It's hard to like singularly pick, one. Like I had one guy I was tattooing and he kept disappearing to the bathroom. It turns out that he was going to the bathroom and rubbing cocaine into his tattoo to like numb the skin. It healed horribly. There was another guy that he had coffee, but he snuck a bunch of some hard liquor into the coffee, so he's drinking that and he's steadily getting more drunk. And finally I was like, I'm not an idiot. I'm like, we're not going to continue this tattoo. You can come back when you're sober. I had another guy. He was a ex-Marine. He came in and he wanted a pit bull tattooed on his chest. I was like, okay, no problem. And so I'm drawing it up, and he leaves with his girlfriend, comes back a little bit later when it's all drawn up, and he has a bottle of vodka, and he's had almost all of the bottle except for a tiny little bit. And I looked at the shop manager, and I was like, Cheryl, and Cheryl's like, just do it. Just get him in and out of the chair as fast as possible. He was a big guy, like an ex-Marine. So it was like, it was going to be a struggle if I said, hey, you're too drunk to tattoo you. So I was like, so I'll tattoo. So while I'm tattooing him, he starts barking. He's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm like, looking around. He goes, you got to get into it. When you get tattooed, you got to get into it. All right. So I keep tattooing. And then he goes, you know what happens if you fuck up this tattoo, right? I was like, no, what? He goes, I fuck you up. I was like, all right, tattoo's over, out. So he's like, oh, no, I'm just kidding. So then I continue tattooing him, and he steadily, the alcohol is kicking in. So as Cheryl walks by him, he's like, hey, babe, come. And she's ignoring him. And finally says something like, oh, you're not responding to me. And she goes, what do you want? But Cheryl, she'd been tattooing there a lot of times, so she had a lot of police officer friends. So she called one. So he comes over, like just to visit her, but kind of keep an eye out. And the guy's like, what are you doing here? And the police officer's like, I'm just talking to Cheryl. She's like, get out of here. And the police officer, he has one of those retractable batons. He goes, whoosh, sit down. And then more police officers start showing up, and they're putting on those gloves when they beat people up and stuff. And he got the rest of the tattoo and he left. But yeah, another story in the tattoo world. There's a lot of them in my early days.
Now, have you done any tattoos that depict any of your challenges that you faced in your life?
I don't know, challenge. I mean, I have a lot of people that will have me draw up something original. Well, almost everything is something original. Some will be like just something out of your mind. You think it up, and then some people like my painting. So, I'll do my paintings as a tattoo on them.
I'm thinking more of your life story, some of the things that have happened to you. Have you done any tattoos that represent your life story?
Not really. I think most people, when they get a tattoo, are more interested in representing their life story as opposed to my life story.
No, but I'm thinking your life story on you. Have you got any tattoos on you about your life story?
Not about all the heart. Because what I tend to do is like, I probably shouldn't think this way, but I'm almost embarrassed by, like when I had brain cancer, for instance, it permanently damaged my hearing. So I have constant ringing in one ear. It's called tinnitus. It's like, a lot of the hair follicles broke off. And so my hearing is not that great. So people will call my name and I don't hear them. They think that I'm being a dick and, I'm full of myself because I'm not answering. And it's because I didn't hear them. But I kind of feel embarrassed by that. Like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, as opposed to, hey, I can't hear well, So I don't think I have anything that represents my life story in that respect. Like I had a dog that, obviously my dog was like my best friend, but I had a dog I felt special attachment to. And I remember I was working in one place and lady tattooed a portrait of my dog on me. So stuff like that I'll get.
Okay. So with you having faced all these challenges in your life, is there one message you can give to other people who've either lost a loved one through a terrible accident, who've suffered from brain cancer, who've been homeless? Is there any word of comfort or advice or motivation you can leave those people?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is people don't realize what they can do if they really put their mind to it. I really wanted to be an author, and it's not easy when you're like just a tattoo artist. You don't have anything published. there's not really a degree for writing. I mean, there are some now, but so I remember when I started out, like I was, I wrote, I was sending stuff to indie authors, I was changing stuff, I was getting advice from other people. Just if you want to make something work, you can do it, is my point. And don't be afraid to get input from other people. Don't let other people tell you what you can't do, but don't be afraid to get input from people that are trying to help.
Good advice. So if you had a billboard, if you could erect a billboard with anything on it, what would you put on your billboard?
There's a famous quote by H.P. Lovecraft, a horror author I like a lot. It says, life is indeed comic, but the joke is on mankind.
Say that again. Life
is indeed comic, but the joke is on mankind.
Okay. So you'd like to see that on a billboard?
Yeah, but I don't know if that's a summation of everything. I tend to go along those terms, but I'm actually a pretty positive person, even though like there are people that are surprised. They're like, I thought you were a lot darker than you are.
So what's a positive statement you could put on a billboard?
Just don't give up. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, and if there's something that you're not good at least you tried.
Yeah, keep trying, keep doing.
Right.
Dan, I've got a movement that I work with called Brave, and the objective of it is to stop bullying, harassment, and sexual violence. In that context, what does the word brave mean to you?
I guess brave just means be yourself no matter what anyone says to you. Like I probably had a decent amount of that. I mean, I wasn't homosexual. I did have a different skin color than a lot of people around me. So I haven't dealt with that kind of intolerance. But there's plenty of intolerance with like you look different, you have a mohawk. I mean, in Southern Virginia, if you look like that, a lot of those people are like at the time they had like mullets and drove pickup trucks and they played in the football team and you were just a loser and so it's being brave is being yourself. Like regardless of what anyone says or what anyone does, just be yourself. Stick to your guns. Go. You don't know me, and I don't really care what you think.
Okay. Now, you wanted to talk about your latest book. Tell us about your book.
Well, my latest book, I have a bunch of books out, and they kind of all roughly are in the same universe. That's one thing I took from comics, where like everything kind of happens in the same universe. But the latest book is the whole government falls apart, which I think is kind of I don't know. It's kind of seems like what's going to happen all the time, or like we're always on the edge of something. There's like some massive social unrest, but the whole U.S. government falls apart. I have one guy that he stole some technology. The government recovered from a crash alien spacecraft. Yes, I'm a big sci-fi fan. And then I have another kid who's like he's a young punk rocker, and I kind of base him on my life experience. But he has abilities that I never had that I wish I had. Like he can hear dead people talking to him. He can travel in between dimensions. So all these weird kind of like social pariahs are in this world that's falling apart around them and they don't know what to do. And in the meantime, there's like a cabal of like rich kind of the oligarchy that have gotten together and they've made a deal with like this alien race. Like they've been promised immortality and they made a deal with this alien race to bring back an ancient evil. So they're all working on one thing. These other people are just trying to survive. And there's a lot of turmoil they go through. And in the end, it turns out like the oligarchy of the ancient evil to try to bring back. There are other people, like other races that are coming to the earth to destroy the earth. Like that's going to be too much. We can't let them do this. It's a whole complicated mess, but it's mainly about these people trying to survive.
And spoiler alert, do they survive?
Some of them.
Okay, so one last question, if you're willing to answer it, is have you made up with your military family?
We get along now. I mean, when I had brain cancer, they didn't visit me in the hospital. I called them up and I said, I'm about to go into surgery. They tell me I have about a 50-50 chance of making it. And they go, well, last minute plane tickets are kind of expensive. And so then I got married and they started making plans. I was like, you're not invited to my wedding. So and then when she died and had to run, I allowed them to come to the funeral because that meant something to her family. You know, her family, they're immigrants from Colombia. They really like the support. And so, but that was more for her family, not for them. So I get along with them better now. I won't say everything's 100%, but I get along with them better.
So one last message you'd like to leave our listeners.
Just don't give up.
Just don't give up. Well, you seem to be a very successful tattoo artist, and author. So you certainly have made a success. Thank you so much for joining us, Dan, and I wish you well in your future journey. And I invite everybody, you included, to fly free.
Well, thank you for interviewing me.
Thank you, Dan. Go well.
All right, you too. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Walking Without Skin. We would love your feedback, opinions, suggestions, and ratings. Please share this podcast far and wide to encourage more people to share their stories with vulnerability and authenticity.
I